you what makes y'all say, walk, walk, through what makes it migration. It's that folk back then who would travel great distances to secure a future of positive instances. And though the journey was filled with danger, keeping faith in what's unseen to my people is no stranger. Did I mention all the miles that they covered in search of their hopes and dreams to discover? Seeking a life free of grueling labor and an opportunity to taste the city flavor. The way that it moved people out from the shared proper life of the South. The fact that without Jim Crow, hope and progress had a chance to grow. So I'll tell you what makes it, y'all say, what makes it great migration.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the Bronzeville Trail, Recapturing and Making History. This is our special thank you and update edition. I have my executive director here, John, with us, and he's going to fill us in on some amazing things that have been happening. First, we want to really give you a heartfelt thanks for your unwavering support of all of our projects, of all of our events, of even watching this show. And then I want to remind everybody to please subscribe. We need you to subscribe. We want subscribers so that we can make sure that the message is getting out about the things that we are working on. So like, again, we're today going to bring you up to speed on some fantastic news of things that have been happening with the trail. And Imani, you could show the first 3 slides. So over almost the past 4 years now, we've been working tirelessly to create a trail that not only mirrors projects across the city, but across the country. And also, ours is going to be different because we're going to celebrate the rich history of this neighborhood of Bronzeville while we're promoting healthier habits. So ours is a little bit different. In slide 4, 5, 6, and 7, there are some milestones. So John is going to tell us about, we got a $5 million grant. We've been mirroring the 606. We got a Mellon grant. That's what it looked. Remember what those things look like now, because they're going to be some amazing updates. So, John, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm honored.
I want you to share, first of all, before we even get into those things, what inspired you to take on the leadership role that you now have with the Bronzeville Trail Project, and what's been most rewarding for you?
Divine intervention. January of 2020. And I can't think of or point to any specific reason why. But I reached out to a semi-retired buddy of mine, fellow Kappa, who's a retired architect, semi-retired architect, and I asked him what he thought of the idea. And he immediately went on Google Earth and said, John, it has potential. And this story I'm telling you now is well documented in text messages dated January 2020.
Make sure you save those. Make sure you save those. So there have been some outstanding things, like a lot of things have happened. You were the first guest on the show, and here we are like almost a year later, and so many things have been happening for us. Number one is a $5 million grant. On the next slide, a $5 million grant from the city of Chicago. So what are the priorities for these funds, and how will they be used to move the project forward?
So Dr. McDaniel, let me elaborate on that.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to the $5 million, there's also a $500,000 commitment by Cook County.
Wow.
But these are not grants to the Bronzeville Trail.
Right.
That these dollars are earmarked. It's a public works project. You know, we won't own the trail.
Right.
And the city has set aside $5 million for a pilot activation
Got it.
on the embankment. And the county's $500,000 is to sort of fill in the gaps to the extent that we need additional funding to do some of the things in the planning that the $5 million from the city does not cover. So with that being said, we literally spent the better part of 2023 and 2024, for that matter, working on not only ascertaining the $5 million, but how it should be spent. And so we were first told by the Commissioner of Planning in late March or early April of 2023 that the city had found some money, and we were told how much was found in November of 2023.
Okay.
I mean, that right there, that's about a 9-month gap.
Okay.
Then from November of 2023, after the city presented to us its recommendations, our board took the position that we should attempt to do more than what was being proposed. And so it was advised that we should meet with the local alderman in question, 4th Ward Alderman Lamont Robinson, and 3rd Ward Alderman Patricia Dow. And certainly to our benefit, in the midst of all of that, Alderman Dow was elected Finance Committee Chair of the Chicago City Council, which historically is the most powerful seat in the Chicago City Council. So after meeting with Alderman Dow and Alderman Robinson, they arranged for a meeting with Department of Planning and Development officials, and we had about 3 meetings with them to talk about our vision for how the $5 million should be purposed. And then finally, kudos to Alderman Dow and Robinson, they arranged for a joint meeting between the Bronzeville Trail and the Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Planning and the Commissioner for the Chicago Department of Transportation.
Okay.
And that meeting took place in early October of 2024. And so it was at that meeting that we finally arrived at a mutual agreement as to how the $5 million should be spent. And so these are the 2 outcomes from that meeting, and they're huge relative to the project. So first, I want to recap and remind our viewers that back in the summer of 2022, the City of Chicago funded a feasibility study. And that feasibility study took place in the fall of 2022. We had a charrette with a lot of community engagement around that feasibility study, and it was finally released in January of 2022. And the conclusion of that study, and the study looked at 3 options. It looked at tearing it down, doing maintenance on it and nothing else, or repurposing it. And to really our surprise, it would cost the city more money to tear it down
than to
repurpose it. So I just wanted to remind our viewers that we did have that in hand. And so by the time, one of the outcomes from the October meeting with the city, Department of Planning and Department of Transportation, is the city is committed to letting a task order for the framework plan first quarter of 2025. And a framework plan, for those viewers who don't know what that is essentially an urban planning document that will take a look at the impact the trail will have on the surrounding community, certainly, within a quarter mile north and south of the embankment, but certainly the greater Bronzeville community. And also there'll be some visioning, some anticipation of what the trail could look like, what streetscape could look like along the trail, and then certainly some recommendations relative to a couple of really key spots on the trail. There are probably 3 or 4, if I may, really key hot spots. Certainly one is the eastern end of the trail. The question, quite simply, will we be able to access the Lakefront Bike Trail directly from the Bronzeville Trail, or will we come down grade level and go up the 41st Street pedestrian overpass? That's number one. Also, at Cottage Grove, before, when the train line was intact, there literally was a bridge, and those of us who knows Bronzeville can't even imagine that bridge. I mean, it went all the way from Cottage Grove to Drexel. Wow. It must have been at least 1/8 of a mile long. Wow. I'm kind of speculating, but certainly more than 100 yards. And so now there's housing in there, and so we'll need to come down at Cottage Grove and then go back up at some place, say perhaps on Drexel. But again, we're relying on the architects, the engineers, we're the advocates, we're not the experts, and so they'll recommend how we're to get back up on the embankment, and certainly how we get to the Lakefront Bike Trail. The third spot, certainly, and we're optimistic that over King Drive,
Okay.
particularly, and this is really due to the Bud Billiken Parade,
Okay.
that two things may need to occur. One, perhaps there'll be a bit of an arch of connecting the east and the west sides of King Drive. And perhaps, if there are floats, and this is working with the Fender Charities, so perhaps, maybe, I don't know if they have existing standards of how high, floats can be, but certainly, we can work through some sort of standard, and then perhaps for those floats that are higher, then they would just simply enter the parade route someplace beyond, beyond the embankment.
Okay.
And so, that could be 41st Street. It could be 43rd Street. We don't quite know what that will look like. But certainly we think that that's something we could work through. Because again, that was another spot where you had a bridge literally across King Drive when there was a rail line.
Wow.
So the parade, right, is probably, I think, in its 2025, might be the 98th year of the parade. So this ain't a new problem.
Right.
The parade existed long before when there was a bridge over King Drive, and so we'll figure that out.
Right.
The last place that's really interesting, an interesting dynamic of the project is the western end of the embankment literally runs along 40th Street, and that places it adjacent to Roberts Temple. Now, we always knew Roberts Temple would play some sort of role in the project because, as you said, Dr. McDaniel, we're really embracing Bronzeville history. And so, for all the obvious reasons, it's where Emmett Till's body lay in a state. Certainly, there's been a movie recently about Mamie and Emmett Till. They're actually, Mamie and Emmett Till recently received the Congressional Gold Medal. What we did not know is that there already were plans in the works for Roberts Temple to be named a national monument.
Wow.
And we still don't understand the gravity of that, but no, it's a game changer. That literally, probably the most conservative projections is for the first 3 to 5 years, Roberts Temple is open as a national monument. It's going to attract 1 million people a year. And we're literally adjacent,
smack dab,
to Roberts
that
Temple.
Is so amazing.
So that's pretty phenomenal, and obviously it's going to attract a lot of tourists on the trail. So that's the frame. So we talked about the framework plan. That's going to be approximately $500,000 or more, first quarter 2025. And then the Department of Transportation committed that just as soon as the framework plan is completed, that they would let a task order for what's called phase 1 construction. And so in construction lingo, they talk about phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3. Phase 3, of course, is the build out. And so phase 1 is heavily engineering.
Okay.
And they're trying to ascertain the costs, an estimated cost of the project itself. Some rendition, some artistic work, but mostly engineering. Phase 2 is taking the phase 1 and now saying, okay, you need 2 screws and they're $1 a piece, and doing that throughout the entire project to come up with a document of the projected estimated costs that then, to go into phase 3, the general contractors can now bid on the project based on the phase 1, phase 2 document. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So that's for those, and I'm a novice at this
Seems
myself.
like you've gotten a lot of info.
Well, I was fortunate. My former employer was infrastructure engineering, and so I did get a chance to stick my toe in the world of construction for a bit. So I'm a little more comfortable, but I'm a babe in the woods, so to speak. And so that phase 2 then is, and it's called phase 1 construction. Excuse me, that the Department of Transportation is going to let. That'll be about $2 million.
Okay.
Just as soon as the framework plan is completed. And so for our viewers who are asking themselves and would like to ask us, okay, so what does all this mean? All right, we heard you thus far in the program. When is the freaking trail
going to be
open?
ready.
Right.
I want it to be ready so that I can get up
and
there.
certainly we all do. I mean, I'm already, realizing that maybe I'll be up there on a wheelchair or something. I don't know. But that being said, if the framework plan takes a year, we're in the 2026. If phase one construction.
Okay.
Yeah. Takes a year and a half. We're into 2028. And these are just the realities of it. And the city has been telling us that and cautioning us about, don't get over your skis.
Right.
That these projects, in their best circumstances, take up 10 years. So we started in 2020, and probably it's more realistic that we're looking around 2030. If we cut the ribbon in 2029, that would be a blessing. If we cut it in 2031, that would still be a blessing.
Okay.
So somewhere between, so we'll just say for the purposes of this conversation, future conversations, we're looking at 2030 right now.
Okay. So I also know that we were given a designation of being a cultural district.
Yes.
Leading the work in Bronzeville. It sounds important. I'm not even sure what that means. Can you explain?
Yeah, I know, right?
Explain that. It's so many organizations in Bronzeville. I think it's such an honor.
Yeah, it absolutely is. There are Bronzeville, and we perhaps take it for granted. But as you travel the country and you hear about other historically black communities throughout the country, I can tell you, Dr. McDaniel, that I have not come across a community that's better organized and has more engagement, community-based engagement, and with historical significance than Bronzeville. And when I banter with my New York buddies, of course, they're going to swear it's Harlem. But, we can run through all the reasons why it's Bronzeville. And my drop the mic moment is, have you ever heard of Barack Obama? And then
they have nothing to say.
That shuts them down. So all of that being said, back in the fall of 2023, the state of Illinois Department of Commerce, and their name has changed a bit, but it's the Department of Commerce, let a request for proposal for communities throughout the state to receive what's called a state-designated cultural district.
Okay.
And the number of communities throughout the state certainly, applied. A number of those communities are in Chicago. The city of Chicago itself prepared and submitted the application for Bronzeville, and some of the other state-designated areas in Chicago. Two readily come to mind. One is in Chatham, and the other is what they're looking to rebrand and rename is Puerto Rico Town, which Logan Square area of the city. And so those are just two. There are 5 within the city limits, is my understanding. Chinatown, pardon me, is also one.
Okay.
But the city has asked our organization to be the community partner in this effort. And thus far, we've chaired one meeting with all parties concerned. And I was asked to be the district administrator, like I needed another unpaid job.
Another thing to do.
One more thing to do. With that being said, we did have a wonderful meeting. And one of the outcomes, and it's a major outcome, is we believe that the boundaries that were laid out to the state of Illinois to be the boundaries of Bronzeville, we believe those boundaries should change and coincide with the federal boundaries that name Bronzeville Black Metropolis National Preservation Historic Area.
How much would that add?
Well, so on the north end of Bronzeville, it only adds a few blocks.
Okay.
Basically, the boundaries that were submitted to the state place the north end at the Stevenson Expressway.
Okay.
But that leaves out Quinn Chapel, for example. So you can't do that.
Okay.
So we'll go a few more blocks north, but it really extends a little much further south than probably what people would see as Bronzeville. But truly, it was during the time. It was part of Bronzeville, and and a lot of famous African Americans who worked, lived, had businesses in Bronzeville, lived on South Parkway, that we now call King Drive. Yeah. And so those federal boundaries go right up to the cemetery, right up to 71st and Cottage Grove, because there are a lot of famous African Americans, including Harold Washington, but many others, from ages gone by, who are buried in that cemetery. So it does extend it out a bit, more so to the south than really to the north. But we just thought it'd be appropriate to be talking about one set of boundaries rather than have a federal boundary and a state boundary.
Yes.
And we're talking about the same community. That just made sense.
Okay, so quickly, you got to tell us about this. Mellon just sounds important.
Yes, it is.
We were granted funds from the Mellon Foundation, and that is huge. What are those going to be used for?
Yeah.
Like, what was that process like?
And Dr. McDaniel, I'd be remiss to leave this interview without thanking you for all that you have done to advance the cause of the Bronzeville Trail in so many different ways.
Thank you.
And certainly, one of the initiatives that you helped spearhead was the Bronzeville Trail History Project. December 2022, we had a session at Swift Mansion, meet and greet where we announced the project. And then we had a symposium in March of 2024 where we had some amazing speakers that talked about the history of the Stockyard Line. Well, your work was so impressive that Mellon said, "Can we give you some money for that work?"
Oh my
goodness. And so part of our grant, the total grant is $900,000 over 3 years. The grant went into effect October 1, and a portion of the grant funding actually is dedicated to our organization conducting archival research on the history of the Stockyard Line. And there's a direct correlation between our work in the History Project and getting that funding for that specific purpose.
Yes.
The balance of the grant is to document landscape imagination, a botanical review of what sort of plants and other landscape can grow on the embankment, and certainly in our climate in Chicago, and to imagine what that could look like. And so that's a big part of the grant, and we're very excited to have that part. The lead organization on that phase is Botanical City, led by Dr. Maria Villalobos Hernandez, and we're very excited about that, the entire grant, because now for the first time in over 4 years, but we incorporated in September of 2020, as of October 1st, 2024, we now have employees. And at our next board meeting, Dr. Hall, kindly remind them that I'm still owed the $1 that I was promised when I was brought on as executive director for $1 back in 2023. And, accounting requires interest, so I expect a little more.
It'll be like $150.
I expect a little more than $1.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So, of course, you're going to have to come back because we have so much that we need to talk about in terms of next steps, in terms of the history. But we really do want to thank everyone who's a viewer, everyone who is a supporter. I walk down the street and people say, "Oh, you're a part of that Bronzeville thing." Like, it's just, I don't even know, like, the Facebook page. What is it? Bronzeville Trail. Look us up on Facebook because the things we do get posted there, and it's really exciting work.
And all of your programming is now on our website, bronzevilletrail.org, and we call this Bronzeville BTTF TV. So all of the programming that Dr. Hall has conducted, you can find it there. Some really fascinating interviews, not only with myself, but with Margaret Motti of the Bronzeville musical, with other architects and engineers, with other board members, our board chair, Walter Freeman, and our vice chair, David Ali. There's a
Mr.
session
Pasiga.
we have Mr. Pasiga. We had members associated with the Major Taylor movement, I'll call it at this point. And so we've had a lot of really wonderful discussions about who we are and what we're about, what we're going to do, and certainly report back to you the progress on all of these various initiatives, in addition to the build-out of the Bronzeville Trail.
Thank you, thank you. Marty, you can show our last slide, and again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, John, for being here
I'm
and for
honored.
those
Pleased to
amazing
be here.
updates.